welcome to Relationship Helpers with Vincent and Laura Ketchy. Today's guest is Dr. Jonathan Robinson, a licensed clinical psychologist from Athens, Georgia. He will be discussing his book, Teachable Moments, Building Blocks of Christian Parenting.
Hello and welcome. This is Vincent Ketchy, the host of Relationship Helpers. I'm excited today to have with me Dr. Jonathan C. Robinson. Dr. Robinson has over 43 years of clinical experience working with individuals, couples, and families. He completed his PhD and specializes in child psychology from the University of Virginia. He has worked with children who have had ADD, ADHD, conduct disorder, autism, and learning disorders. He is also a speaker and the author of Teachable Moments, Building Blocks of Christian Parenting. Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you for having me, Vincent.
So tell my audience a little bit more about your background and your expertise.
Well, as you said, I have 43 years of clinical experience. The degree from the university is in school clinical child psychology with minors in ED, LD, special education, and child development. That's a mouthful. I have to take a big breath before I say that.
Okay, right.
But over the years, about half of my caseload was with children, teens, and their families. And my book, Teachable Moments, Building Blocks of Christian Parenting, really is a summary of my clinical practice over 43 years. I did cognitive behavioral therapy, directive problem-solving oriented therapy, so I did a lot of behavioral prescriptions, between appointments, and a lot of the protocols and other things that are included in my book come out of that experience. So it's been a really important part of my whole practice.
So you came up with a lot of plans for different families to help them work through issues.
That's true. The appendices in the back of my book are those actual protocols, those how-to instructions for developing a quieting response, which is a breathing relaxation procedure, for doing therapeutic journaling, for example, for doing behavior management with children. Lots of different protocols in the back of the book.
So a lot of tools, it sounds like.
Exactly.
So what family issue do you help with the most, you would say?
Wow, so many to draw from. Usually families, especially new families, they have some issues figuring out how to handle a new baby in the house. And so my clinical practice goes down to age 2 up to age 80. So basically getting used to being new parents is a big thing. I know when my wife and I had our first child, she being a clinical social worker, me being a clinical psychologist, we were like uber parents, okay? We knew we had all the answers and did it right. And so Rachel had colic for several weeks. She probably played it for several months.
Wow.
And so we went to a pediatrician in downtown Philadelphia, nothing but the best for my daughter. Right. He spent about 5 minutes with Rachel and 20 minutes with us, and he said, "Your daughter is a third of your family. She deserves a third of your time and attention." And that was such an eye-opener for me. It really reminded me that, as parents, we need to be able to take care of ourselves as well as taking care of our children. Mm-hmm. So there's a balance between those two functions in family.
So it's really balancing your time and your energy so that you don't burn out in one area or the other.
Very much so. In my book, I talk about a plexiglass pyramid of relationships. And at the top of the pyramid, above the pyramid actually, is our relationship with God, okay? And as we are able to feel comfortable in that relationship, as we're able to refer to Him as Jesus does in Scripture as Abba, which basically translates daddy, that personal relationship really empowers us to be the best couple, to be the best individual we can be. And then the next step down in the pyramid is our relationship with our spouse. And so as we function well together as a couple, as a marriage, then we have the resources to go one step down on the pyramid to our children. And then as our family functions in a healthy way, then we're able to go to extended family and to coworkers and friends and so forth. And so it's a kind of a trickle-down experience, which means the beginning of it is our taking care of our relationship with the Lord and then taking care of our relationship in the marriage.
So you really have to have your priorities correct.
Exactly.
And so you're saying sounds like some of the families get that out of order.
They do, yeah. And any number of things could happen. I mean, oftentimes because of the needs and concerns and demands, dependencies of a newborn child, the dad sometimes feels left out, okay, and starts acting out for one reason or another. He's not getting the attention that he wants, and so that's a conversation for mom and dad to have, and maybe a dividing of responsibilities so that dad feels more included.
Right, so it's limited some of the responsibilities he can do, but he can do a lot of them.
Exactly.
So you've been counseling for over 40 years. Have there been any trends in this area that has changed over time?
Very, very much so. If at the risk of being political for a moment, I think a lot changed when pharmaceutical companies were given the permission to do commercials on television back in 2000. That was a huge mistake that our Congress made, and since then, there has been an influx, in my work at least, there's been an influx in attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. There's been an influx in bipolar disorder. And basically that's because the tail is wagging the dog now. People see the commercials on television and they say, that's going to work for my kid, and they go to the doctor asking for the medicine rather than talking about the symptoms and the doctor making a decision about whether medication is indicated or not. So as a clinical psychologist, of course, I don't prescribe medication, but oftentimes folks come to me for the data. I can do psychological testing to determine whether there's a neurochemical or an organic component, so I can confirm it. But sometimes the parents already have the child on medication, and then I say, no, he doesn't need it, and they think I'm from Mars, okay? But I'm looking at the organic and neurochemical data from my evaluation. So I do a lot of consultation with pediatricians and with psychiatrists in this regard to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Since 2000, when pharmaceuticals started doing commercials, that people or lay people began to maybe diagnose their children instead of having the professionals to diagnose their children.
I really believe that, yes. And that's increased the number of specific diagnoses that I've treated over the years.
Okay, so when they come in with that mindset already that they've diagnosed their kids, it's hard to change their minds, and especially if you have a medical professional or an MD, a medical doctor who's already gave them a prescription, it really, you have an uphill battle.
Yes, I do.
In your book, you talk about 9 truths about children and teens that you've learned over the past 40-some years working. Could you tell our audience a little bit more about those?
Well, these are what I call imperatives, and I caught some heat for putting things in absolutes. And as a cognitive behavioral therapist, I'm not real fond of absolutes myself, but basically to grab the attention of parents, I titled my chapters such as chapter 1 being Communication is Relationship, okay? And the point there, of course, is that we cannot not communicate. And how we communicate sets the tone for what kind of parenting we have, and also sets the tone for the quality of relationship and for the parents' addressing of the child's needs and feelings. And so all of that chapter is based on helping parents understand empathy, what Thomas Gordon calls active listening, and being able to identify when your child has an emotional fever. And I say in the book and with my classes, all parents know how to treat a physical fever. They put a thermometer in the child's mouth and they do medicine, or they go to the doctor, or it's chicken soup and bedtime or whatever. But emotional fevers, they're kind of clueless sometimes. And so I encourage parents to look for verbal and nonverbal cues that the child is having an emotional fever. And then the go-to response for an emotional fever is active listening. So if my child's acting up, okay, instead of saying, you better get your butt in control or you're going to bed, okay, I say, wow, you're really dealing with something right now. What's going on? You seem really upset, or you seem really angry. And that's empathy or active listening that helps parents kind of bring the child's fever down. A lot of parents try to make a choice or a decision for the child when their fever is high, and it falls on deaf ears. And so I encourage parents, when the fever is low, when they're able to use active listening to bring the fever down, that's when you make a difference in your child's life.
So you're talking about at those times you really need to engage them with active listening instead of forcing maybe something upon them.
Exactly. I'm teaching a class right now at one of the local churches. The challenge that I have for the parents who are in the class is, what do you want with your child? Do you want a power relation? Do you want power, or do you want relationship to be prominent? Okay, all parents know how to make power prominent,
Right.
but that's at the expense of the relationship. And so once the relationship is established, then you can use your earned authority as the dad or the mom to make a difference in your child's life. Other imperatives that are included in my book: a family is not a democracy. A lot of parents think, they want to do the right thing and include their children in the decision-making process, but any family who has 3 or more children are outvoted.
Okay.
And so parents need to accept their authority and make decisions with the help of the children. So I use a term called benevolent despot. Okay, those two words don't seem to go together, but basically the despot means I'm in charge, I make the decision, but the benevolent means I understand your needs and feelings, and I'm going to take those into consideration as I make a decision. Other imperatives that I include in my book: hormones will wreak havoc, okay? And so we talk about latency age and adolescence, where hormones come into play and how parents can handle those situations. A lot of that has to do with teenagers getting into self-care. So I have one of my protocols on weight management. I have another protocol on therapeutic journaling. These are included as appendices in the book to help children and parents address hormones will wreak havoc. And then an overall principle of the book is helping parents move their children toward the principle of responsible freedom. And that is, you give your child as much freedom as they demonstrate responsibility for. And when they are irresponsible, you pull back on the freedom.
Okay, so it sounds like you're dealing with some parents that are maybe a little too legalistic, and with where you're saying they're not really engaging them, they're just coming down hard on them, and then you're dealing with some parents who are too relaxed, using maybe too much democracy, we'll say, with that's unhealthy as well.
Yes, very much so. Jim Fay is another psychologist, and he put a book out called Love and Logic.
Yes.
And he talks about the drill sergeant parent, the helicopter parent, and the logical parent. And I really draw on those resources. The drill sergeant is what you're talking about in terms of being demanding and authoritative. The helicopter parent is constantly on search and rescue missions, trying to bail the child out. The love and logic parent joins with the child in working through thoughts and feelings and helping the child make good decisions for themselves.
They are let's see, you were saying the amicable despot, is that right?
The benevolent despot.
The benevolent one, yes. Okay,
benevolent despot, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And that's really what that the logical parent is.
Yes, and the benevolent despot assumes responsibility and authority, but with the consideration for the needs and feelings of the children.
So they're adults and they're making adult decisions instead of letting the children make decisions that aren't as well informed or with as much maturity. Correct.
And also in my book, I talk about developmental stages, both for children and also for parents. And this is kind of a new concept. Everybody knows about childhood, adolescence, odyssey, adulthood, active retirement, and full retirement. Those are the age stages that we go through as in the life cycle. But the parenting stages, I look at hands-on parenting from birth to about age 5.
Okay.
And that's when the child can't do for themselves and you do for them. And then directed parenting from about 5 to 12, and that's where we tell the children what to do and how to do it, but then watch them and help them in the process of doing it. And then with adolescence, when your child is going into developing an individual identity, you want to give them latitude, you want to give them a way to kind of feel their way through that. And so we shift from directed parenting, for which they would have mood and attitude, to advice-based parenting, okay? And here's where permission comes into play. Son, I have some thoughts about what you're dealing with. Do you want to hear them? Children of all ages really enjoy being asked that question. Children feel like everybody's always telling them what to do and nobody's asking their permission. And so, especially with adolescents, that question is an entree into giving advice, but you don't give it unless you're invited. And then with adult children, we talk about consultative parenting, where my adult child is in charge of their life, but I have some wisdom from my experience, and I'll be glad to consult with my adult child if they ask.
So there's these different stages that parents, if it's healthy, they should be developing into. What if a parent gets stuck in one of those stages?
Well, if a parent gets stuck in one of those stages, then it's going to be borne out in the child's development and attitude. For example, if the parent is stuck in directed parenting and trying to tell their teenage child what to do, that's gonna get old real quickly, and the child's gonna go into mood and attitude and rebellion. Now, another imperative in my book, one of the chapters is teenagers will rebel. A lot of folks want to avoid that rebellion, but it's not going to happen. It's a required part of development for children in terms of finding their individual identity. So as parents, our job is to help them not get into too much trouble in their rebellion, okay, and shepherd them through that process with active listening and advice-based parenting, so that they minimize the damage and they maximize the growth in the process of adolescence.
Yeah, so it's healthy for teenagers to rebel.
It's not only healthy, it's imperative. They must rebel in order to form an individual identity. In terms of parent-child relationship, parents are the best thing since sliced bread from about birth to age 10, okay? I want to be just like mommy. I want to be just like daddy. And then about age 10 to 12, which we call latency age, pre-adolescent latency age, the jury's out. Kids don't know what to do with their parents. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't. And then from about age 13 to 18 or 20, then parents are the enemy, okay? And the reason for that is they're trying to find out what their own identity is. So I know what I'm not. I'm not my mom, I'm not my dad, but I don't know who I am. Now, ironically, when children reach adulthood, 80% of their individuality comes from their parents.
Okay,
so
right.
It's not like you could escape that, okay? But then that 20% is individual, and it comes from their relationship experiences and their personal search for meaning.
During that time, if it's healthy, the parents, or during the teenage years and young adult years, it's really healthy for those teenagers to become independent, but it's healthy for the parent to allow them to become independent and still be there for them when they need to talk.
Exactly. And the need to talk is really the critical piece. And that's where my comments about emotional fever and using active listening or empathy to help understand what the child's feeling, that's where that comes into play. And the neat thing about active listening that I share with the parents who are taking my classes, the neat thing about active listening is you're right when you're right and you're right when you're wrong. So it's a win-win situation. As a parent, I might see my teenagers fuss and say, wow, you're really angry. And if I'm right, they go, yeah, I am. You won't believe what happened in school today. But I might say, wow, you're really angry. And they go, no, I'm not. I'm mad. I'm frustrated. Okay? And so by my focusing on what I think they're feeling, it gives them a cue to start talking about what they're feeling, and then they come up with what they're feeling.
Right. They open up even more.
Yeah. So the neat thing about active listening is you're right when you're right, and you're right when you're wrong. But a lot of parents, it's like a foreign language to them, because most parents are used to power and control and not used to relationship. Or they want to be, but they don't know how to do it. And so with my book, Teachable Moments, Building Blocks of Christian Parenting, I give parents tools, communication tools and relationship tools to learn how to be there for their children. The reference that I use, the guiding principle for my book, is Proverbs 22:6, where it says, train your children up in the ways of the Lord, so that when they grow old, He will not depart from them. And as Christian parents, we are guided by God to follow that rule.
Dr. Robinson, tell us about teachable moments.
Yeah, teachable moments are the gold standard of parent-child relationship. It's when everything is going well, the child and the parent are on the same page, there's a connection there, there's an emotional intimacy that is profound. And from the parent's perspective, you'll see your child's eyes dilate, you'll see their muscles smooth out, and they may take a breath and go, oh, wow. And like you've really said something that means a lot to them, and they appreciate it. Now, teachable moments can also happen non-verbally. Sometimes when I'm walking in the woods with my son, we may just be enjoying nature, and we may have brief conversation about this or that, but that whole event is a teachable moment. Also, teachable moments can be a product of a negative exchange, okay? If my child is acting out or has a mood, and I use active listening to lower their emotional fever, and then we talk through what happened and how he was responding, then he goes, oh, okay, I understand. And then, that's a teachable moment. So these are the gold standards of parent-child relationship. From there, I talk about emotional fever, and I say when your child has an emotional fever, your go-to response is active listening. And that's when things are not going the way you want them to, or when the child, is demonstrating either verbally or non-verbally some problem of some sort. And the way to address that is not to fix it, but to help the child understand and identify what they're feeling until the emotional fever comes down, and then join the child in fixing the problem. A lot of parents tend to be problem solvers, okay? And when I teach about active listening, I tell parents that there are 3 cautions that you need to be aware of. Don't solve problems, don't criticize, and don't judge. Now, that's in most parents' wheelhouse. That's what they do, okay? They solve problems, they criticize, and they judge. I'm taking away these tools, but all of those tools are based on power, okay? And what I'm encouraging parents to do is to base their communication on relationship. So when my child comes to me with a problem and I say, well, this is how you solve it, the hidden message there is, Johnny, you're so stupid you can't figure this out, and I don't have enough time for you, so I'm just going to give you the answer. Now, no parent would actually say that to their child, okay? But in giving a solution, that's the intent, and that's the message that the child receives. If we're growing our children up in the ways of the Lord, as Proverbs 22:6, then we don't want to give them solutions. We want to shepherd them on the journey of growth and help them be able to find their own solutions.
So it sounds like you can have teachable moments in good circumstances and in bad circumstances, and you can kind of at least help or create those teachable moments through active listening.
Very much so. Very much so.
That it prepares the field for that, or prepares the time.
Yes, and I just encourage folks to look for teachable moments with every interaction with their child.
So tell me, during your years counseling, what was an aha or light bulb moment that you had?
So, and this is every therapist's dream, okay? On many occasions, I would say something, and I would see the patient's eyes dilate and their expression expand, and they go, oh, wow. And they'll say, boy, that was worth the money right there.
Okay.
So that could be any number of circumstances, but it's a joy to have, and as a therapist as well, it's a joy to have when our clients respond in that fashion.
So sometimes when you actually speak some truth and it resonates with them, that really
correct.
Yeah, you can kind of see that. So tell us about what's your current passion now.
Wow. Well, this book is my current passion. It came out in 2016 by Morgan James Publishing Company, and I actually retired from my clinical practice a little over a year ago to transition full-time into marketing and promoting this book. I've had a dozen classes over the last year or so, and I'm talking to folks like yourself, other helping professionals, pastors, and other folks, and I'm preparing resources, getting ready to put a newsletter out to subscribers, and also putting lots of things on my website to be available to folks who want to make use of it, both parents and also helping professionals.
So before you had just been meeting with individuals, couples, and groups, but now for the past year or so, you've been able to meet with groups, it sounds like, and
very
be able
much
to
so.
instruct them.
I've been out in the community in a variety of ways and encouraging my colleagues to be able to make use of this material as well and reach their own clients and their own communities with classes also.
It sounds like you really have a heart for building up the church and building up families.
I do, and this goes way back. I'll tell you my story a little bit. I probably didn't know anything about psychology when I was 12 years old. Nowadays, I think psychology is actually taught in high school, but when I was 12, I didn't know anything about psychology. But my brother was 17, and he broke his neck. So he's been quadriplegic now for 53 years, which is really sad, okay? But I spent a good part of my adolescence being with him, helping him stand on parallel bars and, having conversations with him and whatnot. And that was really where I began having a heart for helping people. And then I went to Wake Forest University for my undergraduate. My dad was an accountant, so I took accounting and economics. A couple of my fraternity brothers told me about psychology, so I took psychology. I got a D in accounting, a D in economics, and an A in psychology. I'm no fool. I went with my strong suit.
So the Lord kind of led you through bad grades in a way.
Yes.
So with your
Yes.
brother first, and you really enjoyed helping your brother, and that really built you up, and that's where you kind of started a passion for helping people, and then the Lord kind of, used you, said, so it sounds like you were going in the direction of your father in the accounting realm, and then that just kind of, once you took psychology, and it kind of progressed from there.
Well, yeah, I didn't know whether I wanted to be like my dad or not, but my grades answered that for me real quickly.
Okay, yeah, the door was shut. Okay.
That's right.
Tell us what relationship skill are you the most effective with?
I think probably in my clinical practice, I had a lot of fun, and the folks that I worked with got well, who were children. Okay, so basically kind of 5 to 12 was my wheelhouse, and I shared offices with other clinicians, and sometimes they would say, would you pipe down a little bit? You're having too much fun in there.
So the children were very relaxed with you. They enjoyed it. You created a great atmosphere for them.
Very much so, yeah. And in that context, of course, play is the means of communication for children.
Right.
And so I would use play therapy in the process, but it was also, play therapy with a mission or with a goal. And my interventions were interspersed within the play, and that's how children got well.
So you were the fun therapist that the children enjoyed.
Exactly. And the parents would tell me that, he doesn't like to go into any doctors but this one. He likes coming to this doctor.
Well, we're coming down toward the end. This is our final lap or speed round. Tell us, what has been your biggest stumbling block in your relationship with God?
Wow, my biggest stumbling block in my relationship with God, I would say probably it's not making the room for him that all people need to, that I need to. In my book, I talk about self-care, and part of that process is developing a personal devotional time, a couple devotional time, and a family devotional time. So over the years, I've gotten much better at that, and so I like to start every morning, with reading scripture verses, studying the Bible, and prayer. And that sets the tone for most of my days. But it hasn't always been that way. However, I'm really glad that God never gave up on me. And I consider my life's journey to be one of going from coincidence to serendipity to providence. Okay, so coincidence being things happen for no reason at all. Serendipity being things happen for a reason. And providence being things happen because God is leading me in this direction. And so I feel blessed in that regard.
So sounds like you can see now how God had been leading you all along to where you're at right now.
Exactly. And of course, in Genesis 50:20, Joseph is receiving his brothers in Egypt. He forgives them for their efforts to try to kill him. And the famous scripture from that verse is, what Satan intends to evil, God can turn to good. And looking back on my brother's life, I mean, we had all kinds of healing ceremonies and personal healers and national healers coming to the house and whatnot, and he never walked, okay? And I thought, well, gosh, that's awful. And actually, my brother fell into a pretty deep depression for a while because he took scripture where it says, ask anything believing in God and it will be yours. And he assumed that he didn't have enough belief, and that's why he was still in the chair. Now, hindsight being 20/20, I'm looking back on his life, and I realized, this was a blessing in disguise. And what Satan intended to evil, God can turn to good. And his life has impacted lots of other folks, certainly impacted me in terms of my choice of career. So I think that's another guiding principle, is that, when we're faced with adversity, we need to see how this fits into God's plan for us and what we can do with it.
And so God's really used that adversity in your life to better you.
Very much so.
So what is the best advice you have ever received?
I think it comes from Alcoholics Anonymous literature.
Okay,
and they have a lot of catchphrases, and the one that I embrace is let go and let God.
Okay, let go and let God. Who do you admire the most other than a biblical figure, and why?
Well, I'm a sports nut, and I played hardball. I played baseball for 46 years, starting in T-ball at 6 years old and finishing with adult senior baseball here in Athens, Georgia.
Wow.
And so a little-known fella now, I guess, from growing up, a baseball player named Johnny Callison was part of the Philadelphia Phillies where I grew up, and he was my hero back in the day. I used to take the trolley to the subway, to the elevated train, to the baseball stadium, get in for the bleacher seats, and watch those games. So that was a lot of fun.
So you really love baseball.
Very much so. It's my avocation.
Okay.
And of course, with my work being very emotionally intense
Right.
and verbal, it's a nice counterbalance to have a physical release as well.
Right, yeah. So it's very healthy to be doing something like that too,
Very much so.
so that you don't burn out.
Exactly.
What is your favorite book other than the Bible?
I think a lot of the work from C.S. Lewis has been very impactful for me. You know, he was a professor in England and an avowed agnostic or atheist, and he
Right.
came to the Lord, and he has chronicled that journey with several of his books, both fiction and nonfiction. So I think his collection of books have been most impactful on me as a person and as a professional.
Okay. So we're down here toward the end. Share with us some parting wisdom and the best way to contact you.
Wow. Okay. The parting wisdom, I think, is you're never too old to learn. Okay. You know, I think that our journey from birth to death is about living or preparing to die. And I encourage folks to live. Another scripture that means a lot to me is where Jesus says, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And so I share with patients, and now I share with parents who are taking my classes. Having life is surviving. Having it more abundantly is thriving. And so I encourage folks to move from surviving to thriving. The other thing that's important is that, you know, many of us are parents, and parenting is the longest, toughest job we have, for which very few people have actual training. Okay? We tend to wing it, or we tend to parent just like our parents parented us, or just opposite to how they parented us. And so books like Teachable Moments, Building Blocks of Christian Parenting, my book, gives that specific training to parents in behavior management tools, in psychology and communication tools, and in the path toward Christian parenting that has been so absent for so long. And so this is really an encouragement for me to be able to offer that on a broad scale, you know, throughout the country, to parents who are willing to train their children up in the ways of the Lord, so that when they grow old, He does not depart from them.
So it's not always, or many times, it's not natural to parent maybe well. So it sounds like people really need to work on their parenting to do a healthy and good job.
I agree, and I think that's something that most parents don't understand. Okay, they just do it. They just wing it. Here's a resource for parents where they can not only just wing it, they can get affirmation for how they're doing, and they can also add to their parenting toolbox certain tools that benefit them and their children in certain circumstances.
How can our audience contact you?
Well, I have a website. It's www.jonathancrobinson.com. And that website is up all the time, and there are lots of resources for parents and helping professionals. Almost all of it is downloadable. My book is also available on that website. It's also available nationally through bookstores and electronically through AmazonBooks.com. So there are several means of getting this resource.
Dr. Robinson, thank you for being on Relationship Helpers.
Thank you, Vince, and I appreciate being here with you today.
Thank you for joining us today on Relationship Helpers. It is our hope that you gained some valuable information. For the show notes and more information on today's topic, please visit www.relationshiphelpers.net. Again, that is www.relationshiphelpers.net. If you enjoyed our show, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review. If you had questions or concerns about our show, please let us know about this as well by going to our website, www.relationshiphelpers.net. Thanks again, and have a blessed week. Note that accuracy and authority in regards to the subject matter covered today is not a replacement for professional care. Neither the host, the clinicians, or the guests are rendering clinical or other professional advice. Seek professional help if you need it.